Every nation in every region now has a decision to make. Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists.
Welcome back to the Backwards History Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Will, here with my co-host, Kevin. Say hi, Kevin.
Hi, Kevin.
Shut up, Kevin. No comment.
No comment.
No comment. All right. Well, as most of you know, this week is the 18th anniversary of the attacks in New York on 9/11/2001. And this episode is going to be about that. This has been an episode that me and Kevin actually were talking about doing before we ever even started the podcast. And it's all kind of been leading up to this. And then from here on.
It has been quite a journey. And we're just getting started.
I'd like to start off by me and Kevin giving our accounts of where we remember being on that day. 'Cause I know everybody's got their own personal accounts. Everybody remembers where they were and what they were doing. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yes, as Will mentioned, that's the day everybody remembers where they were, what they were doing, how they felt. For me personally, I was at school. I was just a young boy. I was sitting in the band hall, and our band director came up and made the announcement. And he made the announcement. It sounded very casual. It wasn't like I don't think he fully understood the severity of what had transpired.
You were 6th grade?
6th or 7th.
Yeah.
And he mentioned, I think his exact words, if you've heard about the recent attacks in New York and would like to speak with the counselor, you're dismissed. And I just remember thinking, I'm really just not up to date on current events. I need to pay a little more attention. And
so you were like really confused as to what was going on.
Right, I was like a 13-year-old boy, not really understanding the gravity. I think a lot of people at that moment didn't fully understand what was going on. And oddly enough, my next class, I ended up going to history class. And they got the TVs with the live feed of what's going on. And you witness it, firsthand. And these attacks, people dying, buildings on fire, exploding. And I remember just sitting there wide-eyed, kind of slack-jawed, just thinking, what's going on, not knowing what to think or how to feel. And, here we are removed 18 years later, and still a lot of unanswered questions and just never fully understood why.
I remember being at the tail end of English class, and we started hearing, teachers were talking about it. I can't remember if our English teacher actually was telling us about it, but we're hearing whispers like planes were hijacked, things like that. But I don't think we were told that they had been flown into any buildings. And the bell rang. We went to our next class, and my next class was my science class. And I do remember him turning the TV on. I'm not sure if it was prior to the second plane hitting or right after. I'm not sure if this was a live feed or not, but I do remember seeing the first thing I saw was a shot of one building already burning and the second plane hitting the building. I don't know if that was when it happened or if it was already just playing as a loop. But I do remember a lot of people getting checked out that day and things like that. But, me and my siblings had to stay at school all day. But I remember that the whole day felt really, really strange. Of course, I'm the child of 2 military members, and my first concern was, okay, when are they going to get deployed? Because my youngest memory as a child was, being like 3 years old, standing on a flight line, and watching my mom get off of a plane when she got back from Desert Storm. So that my only thought was, oh crap.
Right.
Now both my parents are going to get deployed somewhere overseas for something because someone's going to take responsibility for this. And somehow 8th grade me knew it was Middle East related, or at least that's where they'd end up. So that was our concern around our houses when they were going to get that phone call.
And I remember I have an uncle. He had just gotten discharged, and there was talk of him possibly being brought back
recalled,
into active duty. And he had just gotten married, and we had similar concerns. Like, it's only a matter of time before we react. We go looking for who did what has happened.
Well, before we go any further, me and Kevin want to actually kind of observe a bit of a moment of silence. I know this will be released on Monday prior, but some of you will be listening on 9/11. Whenever you listen to this, just go ahead and give a moment of silence for those lost in the attacks themselves, and those that have been lost because of 9/11 related illnesses past from inhaling all of that mess that was in the air. So there's been a lot of first responders that have died of cancer and things of that since then. So we want to observe a short moment of silence. Okay. That moment of silence was done as a means to show respect for the fallen of that day. And we don't want anything we say from here on to be taken as disrespect for them in any means. That was horrific, regardless of what transpired exactly or who was responsible or whatnot. We want everyone to understand that we definitely feel for everyone affected by that day, either directly or indirectly, or everyone affected by the 18 years after, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it. We don't agree with the official story.
No, there's a lot of coincidences.
And if you listen to our last episode, me and Kevin are not fans of continuing coincidences, as I guess that's the best way we can put it, because they kind of cease to be coincidences when there's so many.
Once you start to stack coincidences and you get past 4 or 5, and then I'm just like, really?
Right. Like, you want me to believe that too? I think there was a lot to gain by a lot of people for this to happen.
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot of money that was made in the last 18 years because of what occurred on that day.
We had a podcast several episodes ago about the military-industrial complex.
Big money maker.
And the amount of money that they can make off of war and things like that. The quote-unquote war on terror, air quotes,
Of course,
has been going on for 18 years. That is the longest conflict that the United States has ever been involved in. Am I correct, Kevin?
Oh, yeah. It was the longest conflict a while back.
There were people that were born on 9/11/2001 that will be joining the military on 9/11/2019. They grew up in the age of the war on terror and fighting the terrorists, as GW would have quoted it.
GW.
Even disregarding the last 18 years, let's talk about the money that was stood to be made off of that one day. Larry Silverstein bought the rights to turn the World Trade Center into, him and his partners bought the rights to turn the World Trade Center buildings 1 and 2, when he already owned building 7, turn them into commercial business space. Immediately after purchasing those rights, he took out terrorism policies. Now, today, terrorism policies are
commonplace.
Yeah, they're normal.
Sadly.
That's one of the unfortunate side effects of September 11th. But in 2001, that was unheard of.
Not a commonplace word as it is now.
The worst terrorist attack we had was a domestic terrorist. It was
Timothy McVeigh.
Yeah, in the Oklahoma City bombing. But that was several years prior, one-off kind of deal. Mm-hmm. Now every day you hear of terrorists this, terrorists that. But even after the buildings fell, Larry Silverstein sued to get both buildings seen as individual acts, so to basically double his payout afterwards. And I think he got the policy only like 6 months prior to the attacks in the first place. And that's unheard of. Why would you even just all of a sudden you buy these buildings like, okay, terrorist attacks, let's go ahead and insure them for those. Oh, and by the way, he even bought the exclusive rights if the buildings were destroyed by any attack or act, that his company had exclusive rights to do the rebuilding on the property. That's a little bit too on the nose, I would think.
Right. And it's very interesting that he used the terminology terrorist attack, because acts of war aren't normally covered by private insurance. For him to make that specification before the acts of terror became part of the common vernacular is very, very suspicious. He's ensuring that this payout is going to occur.
Now, further than that, that's a lot of gain by a private individual who subsequently every single day would go and eat breakfast at the top floor diner every single day. And his family members, like his son, apparently worked in the building as well, one of the businesses. Larry Silverstein, had a doctor's appointment that he had to go to that morning. Not unlike our last episode talking about J.P. Morgan all of a sudden being sick before he had to get on the Titanic. Mm-hmm.
Convenient.
Right, really convenient. So that's how many coincidences so far?
About 3 now.
Right, and his son wasn't there. A couple other important people weren't in the building on that day. Not to mention, like we said, he already owned Building 7, which fell at 5 o'clock that evening on 9/11 just from office fires in its own footprint, straight down at almost free fall speed.
Interesting.
And Building 7's actually where they house the emergency readiness office for the government of New York City. When something would happen, they actually had a basically a bunker in that building for the mayor and police chiefs and things like that.
Higher up, government figures.
And one of the main tenants in the building was the CIA, actually, and that's public record. Mm-hmm. So it's a little suspect.
Yeah, and if you go back in American history just by itself, this isn't the first time an act is sensationalized and used to justify going to war or armed conflict.
Well, several episodes we talked about always giving people a boogeyman. So here's your 21st century boogeyman, or your quote unquote new Pearl Harbor, as the the Foundation for a New American Century would coin. But go ahead, Kevin.
Right. Now, with this particular attack being so recent in everybody's memory, and as when we started, Will and I discussed, where we were that day, and here we are 18 years removed and can remember it very vividly. It's difficult for people to kind of separate their emotions and kind of see what's really going on. So I've picked a couple of instances in U.S. history where similar occurrences have happened. As you listened to one of our episodes previously, media manipulation, this plays very heavily into it. Because we all know who owns the media. Those who stand to make money.
Of course, I just want to interject here. Several media stations were reporting instances that hadn't happened yet on 9/11. Like the BBC announced that Building 7 had collapsed when it was still visible in the live feed in the background of the reporter.
Tack on another coincidence there.
Right.
So to give you some historical facts that kind of help you understand, maybe you can see the pattern such as I do. The U.S. government is really good at taking events and garnering huge public support to justify going to war. And any war in history, you can find somebody who made $1. So to start, we have the USS Maine, which I think a lot of people are aware of. It basically, in 1898, it was parked in Havana Harbor. Do they park boats?
They park boats. They dock boats,
Dock boats, there we go. And all of a sudden it exploded and sank to the bottom of the ocean. The journalist of the day sensationalized the story. Oh, the Maine was attacked. Remember the Maine. Over and just spreading this all over. And the government capitalized on that publicity to justify, we were attacked. Now we have to go be the aggressor. You fast forward to World War I. You had the sinking of the Lusitania off the southern Irish coast. 128 Americans died. Secretly, though, the Lusitania was shipping munitions, which it wasn't supposed to do. And the German U-boat sank it. Now, what's interesting about that one is it was denied in the official record that it was shipping munitions, but in 2009, an underwater archaeological team actually went down there and no, they were shipping munitions. 2 years after it sinks, the U.S. uses that as part of their reason to go to the end of World War I, or the Great War at the time, because you can't have World War I before World War II. Unless you're planning World War II. But more recently, you see the Gulf of Tonkin incident prior to the Vietnam conflict, where, once again, a U.S. ship is in the Gulf of Tonkin. They're helping the South Vietnamese, even though we're not supposed to be involved. And we basically provoked the North Vietnamese to attack. And then President LBJ there gets the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, which basically gives him unchecked power to send armed military, or just military in general, anywhere he deems necessary to quell rebellion, or in this case, stop the spread of communism to the South. But you start to see a pattern. These events occur. Media jumps on it. We were attacked. This is the boogeyman in the shadows you didn't know about. We have to go fight. And you see it war after war after war. We're never the aggressor. We're always the one minding our own business. Here comes somebody starting trouble. Now we have to go handle business. All along the while, somebody's raking in money.
Another thing that kind of is suspect about that day, and has been with several other instances since then. A lot of people don't know that on the day of the 9/11 attacks, there were training exercises going on around the country for the military, because everybody wonders why the planes weren't intercepted by fighter planes, things of that nature. That's because they were out playing war games. They were out doing exercises for the exact same scenario that was actually going on. One of the things that the Bush administration liked to tote around is, no one could have ever imagined people taking, planes and using them as missiles and flying them into things. However, for at least a year prior, they had multiple training scenarios, multiple training exercises done with that exact scenario in mind. One was flying a plane into the UN building in New York City. One was flying a plane into the courtyard of the Pentagon, and along with multiple other things. There was one even in June of 2001 that its main little, I don't want to say poster, but the main, layout, I guess it was probably the slideshow, the PowerPoint's first slide,
Right.
had actually planes and Osama bin Laden in the middle of them. Had a picture of him. He was the boogeyman. He was the boogeyman before there was even a boogeyman to need.
And he held that mantle for many, many years.
And I found it always interesting that, CNN had a reporter in there to interview him right before it happened. I don't know if it was literally right before it happened, but CNN could find this guy to, take a video of him. But it took us 8 years. The most sophisticated intelligence apparatus in the world. And it took us 8 years to find this dude.
The greatest army in human history.
Right, and a reporter with a camera found him in a cave. And then, oddly enough, every video that kept getting put out, he would put out a new video all the time. He'd get younger and younger every video. When the first video we saw him, dude was in a cave in Afghanistan on dialysis.
Yeah, rough way to go.
And then when we kill him, quote unquote, there's no video. And then he's buried at sea with no witnesses. Just so happened to be right before an election.
Right. Need some sensational journalism.
What's the coincidence little tally mark up to now?
We're up to about 8.
Right. So it's extremely, extremely strange. Oh, and then Muhammad Atta, which is one of the hijackers, him and a couple of his cohorts' passports somehow landed almost nearly at the feet of an FBI agent in New York City, unscathed, untouched, when it was in a guy's pocket or bag or what have you, inside a plane that rammed into a building above its maximum operational speed. Somehow went through a fireball, out a building, fell hundreds of feet, and landed completely unscathed on the concrete below, several blocks away from the World Trade Center. I mean, stuff happens.
Oh, yeah.
Crazy stuff happens.
Every day.
But you found the passports, but every plane has 2 black boxes so that, when a plane crashes, they can get them and they can find out what happened in the last few moments of the plane's life, so to speak. They found none of them. There's 2 planes, so that's 4 black boxes. Titanium cases supposed to be indestructible. They never, quote unquote, found any of them. There was 4. Never found any of them. But they've got the passports.
Chalk that up to coincidence.
Another coincidence, right? Jet fuel does not burn hot enough to melt steel. Jet fuel does not burn hot enough to melt steel. Yet, when you watch some of the videos from 9/11, you can see molten steel coming out of the building. While they're still standing, you can see molten steel spilling out. They look like a bunch of sparks, basically, but it's molten steel. Not possible. Not even possible. Like, I could go with the whole, you made the floor sag. That's fine. I guess I can get with it. Maybe it makes it hot enough for them to bend. But where'd the molten steel come from? Because even first responders said that when they were at ground zero after the collapse and they were clearing people out, they would see molten steel just running down the channel rails underground as they were, excavating, trying to find survivors. Mm-hmm. They would see molten steel. They would open up sections and there would be fires still burning in areas where there hadn't been oxygen in a while. There's a lot of coincidences, a lot of physics, a lot of chemistry, a lot of stuff that just does not make sense with the official story.
That's true. And of course, we couldn't cover all this in a single episode or possibly 10 whole episodes. But as usual with this podcast, we're just wanting you to just think and just take a moment, forget the official story, and just look at the evidence for what it is.
Don't just take what you're fed and call it gold. Look at it. Really look at it. Don't just go, oh, well, GW got out in front and said, if you're not with us, then you're with the terrorists. And, oh, well, I guess if I question him, then I'm with the terrorists.
Fear is a powerful, powerful thing.
Here we go again, quoting or referencing our favorite book around here. In 1984, the people were regularly hit with rockets, just randomly in different neighborhoods and things like that. And they were always blamed on whoever they happened to be at war with at the time.
Which constantly changed.
But it kept the people in fear of those people and kept their support with the party to go and fight these people. You got to fight these people. They keep rocketing us. Come to find out, their own government was rocketing them to keep them in fear.
So, in order for us to protect you, you need to do what we say.
Gave them a boogeyman.
That's it. If you're too busy fighting the boogeyman, you can't fight your government.
I remember one thing I've remembered over the last 18 years is a lot of the time they say, we were attacked because the terrorists hate our freedom. Mm-hmm. But ever since 9/11, our freedoms have been chipped away in the effort to fight terror, fight terrorism, and things of that nature. So, if the terrorists hate our freedom, and our freedoms have been taken away since 9/11, wouldn't that mean the terrorists have won?
It makes you think, if the government's the one taking away our freedoms and our liberties.
What was it that Benjamin Franklin said? Those who would give up a little liberty for temporary safety will deserve and have neither liberty nor safety.
Yeah, something to that effect.
Something to that effect. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure. It's been quoted multiple different ways with the same basic premise. If you give away your rights or your liberties, say, well, if it'll help us fight the terrorists, you can search my stuff or whatever. You will not have that security and you will not have that safety because no amount of giving up your freedoms will ever make you safer.
Yeah. Just make you more compliant.
Gives the government more power. Mm-hmm. So, the biggest and baddest form of power is fear. Maybe not fear of the entity directly, but the fear of another entity that makes you cling to them. Mm-hmm. Don't take things at face value. Don't just eat what they're feeding you. They being anyone.
Oh, yeah.
Don't take what we're saying and just eat it.
Please don't.
Look things up for yourself. Dig a little deeper.
Form an original opinion on something.
Right. But I will warn you, if you go down this rabbit hole, it can get pretty crazy and you will always want more answers and you'll just get more questions.
There's not always an answer.
Right. But there's more truth in it. Mm-hmm. But as always, don't take our word for anything. Look it up for yourself. Do your own research. And trust, but verify.